Cool. So this is the November 10th Calico community meeting. Could I get a volunteer perhaps to take some notes for me?
I actually won't volunteer this time because I need to step away briefly, so can't really do it today. Sorry.
I can do it.
Thank you, Sean.
Here's a link to the meeting details. So yeah, do a quick check-in on release activity. I think the big one is 321, which just came out sometime between Friday and Monday. I think most of the images were pushed on Friday, but operator and docs came out on Monday to polish that off. Big features there are we've added some additional support for service-based network policy, so Windows data plane support and support for ingress rules that reference services. I think Matt's here. He's going to show a little bit of that later in the meeting. We also did some Bgp improvements. So there's a new API that lets you view Bgp status, including routes and agent status and things like that. So you don't have to log on to the node to see that. Also added a little bit of fine-grained control over which prefixes you want advertised, so you can toggle on and off for IP pools, which whether or not you want to filter those prefixes. We also added a mode where you can run Calico in non-privileged, non-root, with some minor limitations and associated operator config for that. And then another one that I always forget about was Sean came through with a cool IP reservation API. So you can block out IPs or CIDRs within your pool space to so they're not automatically given out to pods, which is pretty neat. There's a bunch of other minor stuff in there as well. It's all in the release notes, so give that a look. There are a couple known issues with it. So I think the biggest one is just that there was an OpenStack packaging issue. So we're going to be doing a 3.21.1 release likely in the next week and a half or so to fix that, and a couple other small improvements around that as well. So keep an eye out for that. But for platforms other than OpenStack, all should be well. On other release front, I think Matt is working on some patch releases for 3.17 and 18 to get some CVE fixes out. And those should be out in the next couple of days, I think. Thought I saw those tags being pushed. And we're starting to look at stuff for 3.22. And that's probably going to be next year with vacations and stuff coming up over the next month and a half. So more info on that as we sort of figure out what's going to be in it. Let's see. Eric, you're here. Did you want to talk about anything for operator?
Yeah, I can mention a couple things. Sorry, I don't know what's up with my video. Whenever it was on, it was just all white. So I just turned it off. I don't know if this is better. So yeah, I think for 3.21 we also got in an adjustment for Typha scale. I mean, you did that, Casey. You would know if it is in 3.21, right?
It is, yeah. That's the one. I think we are having some issues with cluster autoscalers, specifically in AWS, where for like small clusters that only have 3 nodes, you would try to scale down to 2, and it would kick off a Taifa and not be able to find another node to schedule it on. So it would say that it can't remove that node. Because for 3 node clusters, we were running 3 Taifa instances. So we made a change to make sure that there's always at least 1 node available for rescheduling purposes, which should let us work with autoscalers that do that sort of thing.
Except in the rare clusters that want to scale down to 0 nodes. I think we're probably good otherwise than that. For those people that run clusters to run cron jobs.
Yeah, we may need to look at that, but I think the majority of cases are handled by this change.
Yeah, I think so. Another one that's probably another rare-ish feature that somebody will be very interested in is the operator can now manage the CRDs that it needs. So depending on if enterprise or open source mode is being used, there's a flag that can be passed to the operator. So it does require updating the operator deployment to enable this, but then the operator can manage the CRDs to make sure the right versions exist, and that if for some reason they would get changed, they would get put back or set back to what they should be. I think that's really all I had for operator.
On that last one, Eric, that means, so like normally you would have to reapply the whole Tigera operator YAML so that any CRD updates get applied through that.
Yep.
I think this means that you can kind of change your workflow if you have this feature enabled to just bump the image version, and the operator will handle doing that for you.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't really considered that, but yeah. I think probably it doesn't hold up though, because sometimes the operator needs the role binding updates and stuff like that, which at least right now is all packaged in Tigera operator YAML. So
right.
I don't think just changing the operator version.
Yeah, the operator I don't think we should update its own permissions if it needs to.
Yeah, it probably shouldn't ever do that, right? But yeah, so yeah, I wouldn't suggest doing that. That we recommend that to anybody, because yeah, we do regularly need to make updates to the roles, or the role. I think there's really only one.
Cool. Forget that I mentioned it then.
All right. That's all I had.
Cool. Nathan, did you have anything you wanted to say about BPP?
Sure. From last time, what we've been working on is mostly, we still are working on the host policy support. We are making progress on that. And generally speaking, some hardening. We are trying to move as closer as a beta-ish version as we can. And as 3.21 is out, we should also work on making a release that targets 3.21. Fully, it's just going to be changing the version number. And on the new features, improvements that we're working on, we are spending some cycles improving the memory interface performance in terms of PPS. So doing some testing and reducing the number of lookups, trying to improve the overall speed that we can reach. And also working on the host stack VCL front on an Envoy integration. so that we can make Envoy on top of Calico VPP, leverage the host stack, and benefit from the TCP speedup or TLS speedup, depending on what you use. So this is work in progress, and hopefully we should have something demonstrable in the near future.
Very cool. I'm reviewing that operator PR penciled in for tomorrow and Friday, so that'll be coming soon.
Cool.
Any other check-ins that folks wanted to say?
Yeah, I have a quick thing about Calico Live. So some of you might know what it is, some of you might not, but Calico Live is a kind of live stream series that I've been doing occasionally since July. So it's been quite successful. I want it to be more successful. So I created a survey, which is only 5 questions. I'm very aware that people don't like surveys very much, neither do I. So it's short, it's literally 5 questions. I think you could probably get it done in 90 seconds. Anyone who, even if you don't know what Calico Live is, that's a useful data point in itself. So I think, do you have the link there? Yeah, you do, great. So anyone who can spare, I reckon you can do it in 2 minutes, can spare 2 minutes for any useful data points, that'd be fantastic.
As a 2-time guest on Calico Live, should I take that survey?
Well, you're a member of the community and it's open to the community, so yeah, I think so. Although, use the, go ahead.
Mostly a joke question, but it's hard to turn down a free survey.
Bring back Casey is not something I want to see from you.
Well, we'll see. There is a free form answer at the bottom. So cool. So let's go through some issues if that's the last update. I've actually queued up a bunch of sort of untriaged issues that have various levels of engagement so far, and I was hoping we could just spin through those, do a first pass at what we think those might be. So let me share my screen here. That's gonna stop sharing somebody else's, yep. Okay, you guys should be able to see this pod loopback connection bug or issue, TBD if it's a bug. So I haven't really done a ton of investigation into some of these yet. I know Tomas has looked at this one and I read it and didn't quite parse it because, well, I just didn't. But it sounds to me like this is a bug. This is like an expected conformant behavior for Kubernetes service proxies.
That's a bug. So for connections that loop back to the same pod in BPF mode, we rely on the connect time load balancer to loop it back right inside the pod. And this particular application they're deploying has somehow got around the connect time load balancer, used a syscall we weren't expecting or something like that. So it's a bug. And Tomas has triaged this one. He's got a Jira ticket and stuff in our thing. So yeah, just missing triage labels, I think.
Cool. It sounds like it has high impact, but is sort of a niche scenario if it's bypassing that. One down. Found this one's from Chris. Oh yeah, I think we were talking about this
Yeah, I did have a comment on this though, related to so what this is about the fact that if you do what I did and disable your overlay, you can get in a situation where kubectl can't reach the well, actually it's the kube, I think it's the kube API server can't reach the Calico API server, and therefore you can't reverse your breaking change without using Calico Kernel, which, I mean, whether or not you should get yourself in that situation is obviously open for debate, but it can happen. People will do it. I did it. And I had Calico Kernel and understood that I could get myself out of it, but and it wasn't a production cluster, whereas it might be. So the reason I had a comment though was, Eric, is this relevant to the operator thing you were discussing? I'm trying to remember exactly how, when you were talking about the operator a minute ago, I thought this sounded related in a way.
No, I don't think so. Well, I mean, the way you named it, you said unable to change CRDs, but I think really you mean CRs.
Yes, I suppose I do. Yeah, you're right. I do. You're right. I do.
Because changing the CRDs isn't what, like, that's not what you did. That.
Yeah, quite. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
This is kind of a new issue now. We have the API server as a component in open source. You used to have to use Calico Kernel, but now I think Chris made a good point that everyone's going to want to use kubectl now.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like the only real fix is probably run this is host networked.
Is there any benefit to running it with an affinity that gets it on the same pod as the API server, or is that?
You can't always do that because sometimes in clusters like EKS, the control plane components are not on schedulable nodes or nodes that are really accessible by the user at all. We might be able to, I mean, I guess you could use a preferred during scheduling affinity somehow to do that when possible, but it's not going to be 100% solution because there will still be some cases. But
the host networking sounds like a better solution.
Yeah. Might get tripped up by, like, if you have a multi-node control plane, like you could schedule it to one of them, but if your networking's broken between them, then only one would,
Depends which API server your request gets routed to, whether it will work. So I think the only real bulletproof solution is running that as host networked, or jumping through some crazy hoops to make sure you can't ever break networking, which is not really a feasible thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, would we want to consider any kind of additional field that has to be set, like a confirmation field? I personally don't think
there's value in that, because I found one way to make this happen, but that doesn't mean there aren't quite a few other ways to make it happen. It feels to me like, the host networking is a better solution.
So this one has some comments on it. I think I left one on this the other day. There were two leaks that we started seeing in 320, one in Felix and one in kube controllers, and I think this is talking about both. To my knowledge, the one in Felix has been fixed. That was the Prometheus metrics leak. Sean, you were on some of these. Was there a second one, or was that just the only?
No, we got confirmation. So the Felix leak, we had a couple of different GitHub issues for the Felix leak, and we got confirmation that they tried the new release, both of them, and the leak's gone. So I think we're good on Felix.
So I think Felix is good. There's a second one tracking the cube controllers, which is already marked and has some diags on it. It seems to be based on the discussion here that it has something to do with an invalid block that exists and is tripping up the garbage collector. So I think there's some state that it doesn't account for. It's like trying to release a block that it thinks is empty, but then when it goes to release it, it says it's not empty. So I'll wait and see what these guys say about their specific leak, but this one might be a duplicate. Okay, error getting cluster info, connection is unauthorized. Yeah, I think I looked at this one a long time ago. So users seeing the CNI plugin fail that this connection is unauthorized message, which is very helpful. The interesting bit is that the RBAC does include, I think it does include cluster informations, get less watch. And in fact, doing a manual check using the CNI plugins cube config works. Impacting some conformance tests. Checked that token rotation is enabled, so it's not that the token is getting out of date. And the last thought I had was that normally you'd see a more descriptive error than this if it was actually an RBAC issue. You'd see something like that. This is a pretty generic error, so I'm not sure what might be going on there. Has anybody seen something like this before?
Not that I remember.
Feels like a pretty bizarre one to me.
Maybe they got a proxy in front of their API server or a load balancer or something that's...
Yeah, I was going to say, is the unauthorized message even coming from the API server? Could it be like a protocol, like a transport layer thing or something? Maybe that's a stupid observation, I don't know.
Casey, where do they say they're running? Or is this like...
This is a Typhoon cluster. I don't think it says what cloud they're running in.
I don't have any idea what Typhoon does. Like how they set things up.
Yeah, maybe I'll drop back in with a question about.
I think Typhoon might bend the Calico.
Yeah, it's got its own Calico manifest baked in right here. So we could look at those more closely and see if it's got anything. I mean, it does have some of these are pretty old. So maybe there's something going on there.
Maybe suggest that they talk to the Typhoon folks.
Well, the guy who raised it is the maintainer for Typhoon. And yeah, obviously anyone can make a mistake, but I trust that he's looked pretty closely at this. So yeah, maybe I'll ask about proxies and see if he's got anything funky going on there.
Might also want to check if they modify the CNI config, because I saw that they're doing basically a manifest based install, so they could have done whatever with the CNI config.
Skip that one for now. eBPF doesn't route external requests to the Kubernetes service. Looks like I assigned Tomas to this a while ago. 321 didn't help. So the Kubernetes service is not routed, but the other services are.
If that's the case, I mean, we wouldn't handle it anything special, so it must be some config on it, right?
I think this is an issue with the BPF data plane. So I think the problem here is that the Kubernetes API server is outside the cluster. So they've sent a request into like a node on the cluster and said, please redirect this, or please send this to the Kubernetes API server, like using the cluster IP or something. But the BPF program doesn't know what to do with it because it's trying to send something to a node that's outside the cluster rather than something inside the cluster, which is what it's designed to do. So that this rings a bell from Slack. I think that might be the issue they were hitting.
So it has like some special prefix handling of things that it thinks are pod endpoints and things that aren't.
I think it's more like the packet comes in and we do like source IP preservation. So we encapsulate and we send it to the backing node, but we don't know what the backing node is because it's a host rather than a
right.
So it's possible they would all work if Calico was running on the control plane nodes, come to think of it, because I think we do support host network pods, which would be kind of the same.
Yeah, it's probably relevant how the cluster's deployed. I don't see that information in here. But it sounds like there is at least some kind of
missing feature there.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one because it's a not too uncommon use case to like create custom endpoints for legacy services and things that are inside the cluster.
It kind of all I think it all works if it's like pods or the nodes themselves connecting to something like that. But what they've done is they've exported their cluster IP range, and then they're using a cluster IP to reach the API server from outside the cluster. I mean, users are creative.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit on us for saying you can use the cluster IP to access outside the cluster. That's
True.
Sort of a rule bending feature we added a while ago, but agree it's a pretty niche.
So I think what we want to do for this kind of case is kind of fall back to what kube-proxy does, just snap the traffic and send it on like IP tables would. Just have a sort of fallback for the cases that don't work with what we have there already.
Yeah, that seems reasonable.
That's a new one. Block keep alive the multicast packets.
Just one comment. Keep alive D can be configured in really broken ways. I have plenty of experience of that. So we need to validate the keep alive D config as well. It's not like VRP on a couple of Cisco boxes. There are ways you can build it that don't really work. I'm not saying it's wrong. It's probably fine, but we should look into that.
Yeah, I've got the config here, but I don't know it well enough to say anything about its validity. I'll have to.
I might be able to help with that. I'll have to refresh my memory, but I might be able to help with that if I dig back into my past.
Yeah, if you could maybe look at that one.
But I don't know if we do anything special with multicast, which may be the problem.
Yeah, the multicast was the bit that jumped out at me.
It sounds like this is between a couple of hosts. So presumably our BPF program on the host interface is dropping the multicast packets because it doesn't understand them or something.
They may be being intercepted because VRP uses a well-known range of multicast addresses. So it could be something that's intercepting them on the basis that they look like they are destined for somewhere. Maybe.
Yeah, multicast isn't really something I thought about too much. BPF data plane. We don't support it for pods, but hadn't thought of it for host interfaces. Also hadn't really expected any particular problem with it.
Yeah, so let's leave this one unmarked for now. We'll do a skim of that config. See if anything jumps out.
Probably fairly easy for one of us to debug and at least figure out what's wrong if we can get some kind of repro. But I think the time-consuming one with this would be getting a repro and spinning up some nodes somewhere that we can do the multicast. I don't know where we've got that we can. Not what sort of lab we've got we can do that. Otherwise, I'll have to ask them for BPF trace for the multicast packets, see what it doesn't like about them, or see what's happening. Might be like an RPF check failing or something like that, because we're not understanding them properly.
So we have a couple left, but I think we're getting short on time, so I'm gonna stop us there. And do a quick round of Calico heroes if anybody's got some folks they want to shout out.
I have one, Peter Solanki, who's been working closely with Tomas to debug various BPF issues. And he's been doing some high scale testing. I think Tomas gave him a patch and he turned around and said, yeah, that runs okay on our 4,000 node cluster. So I think that's That's good of him to try at such high scale.
Yeah, it's bold. Pick up a patch and deploy it right away. I think the highest I have tested to has been 3,000. So I know others have gone beyond what I've done, but it's exciting. Always exciting to see it for real.
Was that the time that you took down an unnamed cloud vendor's region?
Might have been, yeah. I think that was one of the attempts to get to that scale. Yeah, that was a long time ago, though. That was probably almost 3 years ago.
All right, I had one, a hero, Steve Hipwell. He's been active for several things, but one of the things he put up a change that we had been wanting to get to switch to using system critical priority classes. We had been creating our own because when we first started doing the operator, it wasn't possible to use the system priority ones outside of kube system namespace. And I think with, I want to say, Kubernetes 1.17, they were available outside of kube system. So we wanted to switch to those, and he put up a PR to do that. So that was appreciated.
Cool. If there are no other shout outs, then I think I'll hand it over to Matt to do a quick demo for us.
Oh, actually, sorry, one thing before we do that, Matt. The note on this reminded me, we should probably consider adding it to, well, consider and discuss adding if we should use a system critical priority class for the operator. Yeah, just to give it cluster priority. I think it probably makes sense, even though most of what the operator does isn't system, like, isn't system critical in that it needs to be running every minute of the cluster's life, but it's certainly TIFA scaling is important, is probably the main thing that I can think of that would be important for it to do and be available for. Yeah, just
seems like it's probably a reasonable thing to do. Could imagine like you want to roll out a new version of it if you have a broken cluster and need to upgrade or something. You want that taking high priority.
Yeah, that's probably a good example of another reason why.
Not sure there's a huge downside to it either, because it's not like a huge resource hog or run a ton of replicas or anything.
One pod, and yeah. So yeah, maybe we'll get that next. All right.
Okay.
Thanks.
Now you can go, Matt.
Sorry, Matt.
No problem. That's more important. Should be pretty short. It's not too much. So I guess this is pretty much just the other half of service policy. So I think probably previously there was a demo on the egress portion of this. We can go over that slightly too, but let me introduce, I guess, the portions on my cluster here that matter. So let's see, we want to get the pods. So in my cluster, I pretty much, I just have pods in a front end namespace, and they're just going to be my pretend pods for the front end of an app. and I have pods in the back end. And so those are the back end pods. Pretty much not too much. The back end pods are running a couple containers each. One is just basic Nginx, and the other is running an etcd data store just in there. I get that it's probably not going to be like that always in a realistic scenario, but just for this case, I'm running a couple different things running on a couple different ports in those pods. And so previously, it used to be, oh, I should probably increase the font here a little bit. So previously, it used to be that your policy would probably look a little bit like so. So if you wanted to have your front end service access kind of the back end service, you would basically say, create an egress policy, set the destination to be your backend service, and that would pretty much do it. But let's say you wanted to do it the other way. So now we support the opposite side of that, where you can now set a policy that selects the backend portions and sets the ingress rule so that you can select any traffic coming from any of the pods backing, I guess, the front end to reach the back end. So just the flipped version of that. So yeah, so let's show that real quickly here. So let's apply that policy. Actually, in this, before I do that, there's a default deny in this cluster, so things shouldn't be reachable. So if I were to get this service in my backend here real quick, you'll notice that there's two ports that it's grabbing on, port 80, which is for the Nginx, and 2373, which is for the etcd portion of that. So if I were to just grab these here, and then jump into a front end pod. Shouldn't go because it's being denied currently. Same thing if I were to do the etcd stuff, so something like that. So, yeah, so pretty much nothing's working there. So if I were to apply our policy here, it should work now. So we do that on port 80. It's now reachable on Nginx, and for to do that, so it's the etcd portion of that backend pod. So that's all working with that ingress policy. So let's say that if we noticed here, our service or our pods essentially are accepting, they're basically serving two separate containers. And let's say the front end's not really supposed to speak with the back end. It's really just only supposed to speak, or sorry, not the back end, the data store portion of that, which is this etcd instance. It's really only supposed to talk to, I guess, our back end Nginx piece there. So what we can also do now, let me delete what we can also do now is we can set ports on these ingress rules. On the egress rules, it previously wasn't allowed since it basically would grab all of the ports that are defined on the service. Kind of for this ingress rule, you can basically set the ports as well as the service, since getting the ports from the service don't mean too much in terms of this ingress rule, since the traffic being sent will be set from pretty much any random port So you can now set that for the destination. So let's set this policy that'll instead change that so that you can only access any traffic on port 80, which is our Nginx piece there. So if I apply this, should change that. And if we go back to our front end pod, we should be able to access Nginx still, but if we tried to access the data store, it should hang. Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So yeah, now we can set services kind of on the ingress source of all of these rules. Yeah.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Awesome.
So in terms of like how this works, is it based on like the IP addresses of the pods behind the service effectively? So like, what happens like with the API server service or some corner case like that, for example?
Yeah, so it's backed by the endpoint slices. So we go and we grab pretty much the endpoints backing the service through the endpoint slice. So I think it should also be fine because I think the endpoint slice is also populated for like the Kubernetes API and other Kubernetes pieces there. So I think it should be fine. I haven't tried that here in this one.
Probably depends how Byzantine your Kubernetes API routing is, but that's fine.
Yeah, exactly. It depends how many layers of proxy and NAT you've got in that, but I think for a lot of clusters it would work all right. The endpoint slice API should let you also do this for the case you were talking about earlier, which is sort of legacy apps outside of the cluster if you've defined manual endpoints for those, so long as they're, again, not going through layers of NAT or proxying. I think the third and final interesting extension to this would be if we could get the top level selector to apply to services, which is by far the trickiest of the three to implement. So it would be pretty cool to see, and I wanted to at some point brainstorm some ideas with you, Sean, about this. Like apply a network policy to a service so that the rules are applied via node ports or load balancer IPs or cluster IPs, etc., no matter how it's accessed. I did some thinking on it a long time ago, and it got complicated pretty quickly in IP tables mode, at least.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing is you need to do it all pre-NAT probably. And on any particular given host, like you'd have to render all the service policy on every host because a lot of the information is lost by the time you get to another host.
Yeah.
In IP tables mode.
Yeah, I think that was where it got complicated, was the sort of scale implications of that. It exploded pretty quickly. Cool, thanks, Matt. Any other topics in the last 10 minutes or so, 8 minutes? I just thought of one I had forgotten to bring up. We've been talking a little bit about a sort of long, well, it's been stewing for a long time about how we can make the contribution and development process a little bit easier against Calico. I think both new and longtime contributors alike have had some issues with our current multi-repository scheme and the sort of interdependency between all of those. So we're currently doing some brainstorming and prototyping around how we can move a lot of that code into a single place so that you don't need to develop across 3 different repos for new features and keep them in sync with each other through GoMod updates. I think that'll also bring a lot of simplicity to other things as well, like testing even more mundane things like keeping issues in a single place and preventing duplicate GitHub issues. So keep an eye out for that. We're hoping to have something towards that goal, I think, in the next release cycle, next couple of months.
Interesting to know how that would affect you, Nathan. Obviously, we want things to be easy for you as well.
I'd say it's a good idea. Also, it's been a bit complex to grasp where everything was living in the first place. So yeah, definitely +1 this.
Great.
Cool, that's good to hear. I didn't expect a ton of pushback, especially from some of the newer contributors, because
also Go modules can be picky, so that might also simplify that.
Yeah, we end up having to like reproduce the same Go module and make file changes across a bunch of places to keep them in sync, and it's really just busy work. So hoping to cut out a lot of that. So I'm very excited about that change, even though it's really not a end user thing. It should help us speed up development across the board and ultimately be good for people using Calico. Cool. Well, if you got questions on that, hit me up on Slack, or maybe once we get a little bit further in the brainstorming, I'll open up a GitHub issue to track where we're at with that. And let me know what you think. Otherwise, it sounds like we're out of topics for today. So I will let you guys all go. Our next one is going to be in December. We usually do second Wednesday, so that'll be December 8th. Have a good one, everybody.
Thanks. Everyone.